So this is the sequence of commands that we did before, but it turns out there's a similar way to do this in ggplot. And so one of the functions in ggplot is this thing called qplot, which stands for quick plot. And there's different ways that things get defined, and I won't go into all of that right now. So you create the environment inside quick plot that says, you know, we're using, here's the data for x and y, so z and the sign of z. And then I want to add these geometric objects, which is the geom piece, and it says, okay, I'm going to use both a point and a line. And so that C is basically saying create this list of geometric objects, and I'm going to add both points and lines, and then I've got an X label, a Y label, and a main label. And I'll admit, I'm not sure, the one thing that I left off here was the subtitle, because I think there's a different way to do subtitle, and I couldn't quite figure that out. So turns out I actually don't need the pluses, so I'm going to, whoops, pull those out real quick. So this time, instead of the plot that we got before, oh, and I don't need the thing, because that's an example of what it looks like in the console. If I click run, so there's the plot again. And that's what it looks like using that. But there's much more elegant things you can do with, with ggplot. But there's at least a taste of what it's like to go get a package, bring it in, you've got additional functionality, and now you've got other functions that you can run. So, and again, you can zoom around and export and so forth. And then the complete code of what we did is here. The other thing that I typically try to do, and this is also sort of good coding practice, there's a command that you can run called session info, which by and large, most of the time when you're doing stuff, this really isn't that important. But if you're trying to explain a problem that you're having, like out there on Stack Overflow, or if you're, you know, one person's working on a Mac, somebody else is on a PC, sometimes it's really helpful to have this because it gives me the platform, what I'm running under, it gives me very specific details about the versioning, what locale, so if you're working with somebody in a different country, this can become really important. It also gives me a list of everything that was in my sort of workspace in terms of which packages and which versions of the packages that I'm running. And one of the things I'm working on right now, trying to understand a little bit better, is there's actually some cool citation stuff. So if you're using somebody's package, you want to recognize them for that, and you cite them just like you would cite an author for, you know, a piece of literature or reference or manuscript. So, you know, if I'm using somebody's packages and this is very specific, I'll make sure that I've got citations then for all of these things that I'm using to do all of my analysis. So anyway, so that command is just called session info, and it's kind of interesting to run it and see what you get. Run yours, compare it, and see how yours is different than what I had. But this can be really important if sometimes, like, it's like, oh, okay, the reason that this is not working is because that function got added in version 5 and you're running version 3. So something else just to give you a heads up, notice I'm running version 3.2.3. So anybody here ever seen that SPSS, you can add R, you can run R from inside SPSS? Just FYI, you can. It's a selling point by IBM now for SPSS. They only support like version 2.5. So we're going back, I don't know, 5, 6, maybe 10 years. I'm like, really? So it's like, yeah, it runs R, but it runs really, really old R. So anyway, I just throw that out there. I have a bone to pick with IBM. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're not, yeah, and some things aren't backward compatible. That's one thing that, like, when you go out to the CRAN pages and you start reading stuff about the R packages, it'll give you information usually about the compatibility. And sometimes one of the things, people that really get into the development, like this one's brand new, but like on my old computer, I had like 3 different versions of R. So sometimes it's like if you get somebody's code and you really want to run it, but it was only compatible in a previous version, sometimes you have to install the previous version. So like when I was testing it out on SPSS, I had to go and get R2.5 and install it and run it. Anyway, so
is the advantage of RStudio just the layout? Just
yes.
helping organize?
So that's the organization is probably the biggest selling point for RStudio. This is the other selling point. So this is going to be my teaser to get you guys back in here. So in addition to doing R scripts, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you can do here, and I am just absolutely in love with R Markdown. So you can create these things on the fly, and it gives you a default template that will work right out of the box. So I have a title, an author, a date, an output, and embedded in here is R code. I won't try to explain knitter right now, but this is a header, and then I just start typing. So I can put in hyperlinks, I can highlight stuff. This is a summary of something called the CARS data set, and it says I can include plots. Let's make a plot of pressure, and so forth. You click this little button called knit, and I gotta save it. It runs. I have now published an HTML document with my analysis that fast.